Hello everybody, this is Dan Miller for Bluegrass Unlimited magazine, and this is our fourth segment of the How to Learn a Fiddle Tune. In the last couple of segments we talked about basic principles of learning two measures at a time all the way through the tune. You learn the two measures and really have them before you learn the next two measures. We talked about doing that. We talked about making the simplest version of the melody that you can find even simpler than the straight melody. You can take out some notes and make it even simpler. Talked about that. We talked about the song Liberty, and we did an example of that. We talked about how to analyze those two bar phrases in the terms of the form, the whole form of the song, and how to recognize repeat phrases or close to repeat phrases. And we talked about how to recognize or analyze the two bar phrases themselves, like what notes out of the scale are those phrases using, so that can help you later when you're trying to improvise on the song, create your own solos to the song. That information is helpful, and also how to kind of integrate the chord structure with the melody and how those things go together, which I think again is important, and some people don't do that. Fiddle players especially famously don't know the chords, and even some other people playing other instruments, they just learn the melody or just learn a solo, and they don't really learn the chords if they're not playing with other people. If you're playing with other people, you got to learn the chords, but a lot of people just woodshed in their room and don't know the chord structure. So the chord structure is important. Knowing the scale of the key, I think, is important, because you can relate the melody to the scale and to the chord structure, and I think that's helpful information when you're improvising or creating your own solo. The other thing that we talked about is having those notes that you learn, the simplest form of the melody, being anchor notes. And if you know those anchor notes, that'll help you reorient yourself if you get lost during your solo, which is a helpful thing. It'll also help you, again, as a structure to an improvisation that you might be trying. And as I said before, it helps you if you have to change the key. If the singer's singing the song in a different key than you've learned to keep the song in, if you want to explore different areas of the neck with the same melody, it's helpful to know, having analyzed these phrases. And I didn't mention this last time, but if you're bringing the song to another instrument, knowing that stuff is going to be helpful. At least knowing what note the song starts on, if nothing else. If you don't know anything else and your ear's pretty good, just kind of knowing where your beginning note is, if you've got good relative pitch in your ear training, that'll orient you. So if I know the kickoff to Liberty starts on an A note, I know that is the 5th scale degree in the key of D, because we're in the key of D. I know that's the 3rd note of the D chord, and then I know I'm going to walk down to the 3rd note of the scale, 5, 4, 3. And like we said before, you can skip that little lead in a lot of times. If it's coming around to your solo, you don't have to do that lead in. You can just start on that F sharp note for your first 2-bar phrase. You don't have to do the lead in. That's part of simplifying the melody. But if you know it's the 3rd scale degree of the 1 chord where you start the melody on, then if you move to a different instrument, try to move to a different key, even moving to a different place on the neck, it's that F sharp note you got to find, or the A note if you do the lead in. Okay? To me, all that information is handy to have, especially if you haven't trained your ear to the point where you can just pick it up by ear. Okay? A lot of us want to shoot for that, but if we're not there yet, knowing these other kinds of things will be helpful. And it just takes a little time, knowing what notes are in your scale, knowing what notes are in the chords that are in the tune you're playing, and it's going to help to know how to find all those notes on your instrument, okay? And that may seem like a lot of work. Oh man, I got to know what notes are in the scale, what notes are in the chords, where all those notes lay on my instrument. But that's going to be helpful if you just take the time to do it. And it's really not that much work. It just seems a little bit intimidating at first. But if you spend a little time, you can know that information. Have that under your fingers in your brain, and that could be helpful, okay? There's lots of ways to approach music. There's more intuitive approaches, there's more technique-based approaches, there's pattern-based approaches, and then there's theoretical approaches where you know the names of all of these things. All of them work pretty good, and you can approach this any way you want to, but this is just one way to go about it, okay? So having all that under your fingers, and again, if I want to change something, first I'm going to learn this, like really learn this. Like I said, 2 bars at a time, get it into your memory, under your fingers, before you move on to the next 2 bars. If you do that all the way through the A part and the B part of the song, by the time you get to the last resolving phrase of the B part, you've got it. You've got the tune. So then practice it over and over and over again. When I interviewed Richard Bennett for Flat Picking Guitar Magazine, he said he makes his students play just the melody until they get what he called melody burnout. I mean, he really wanted them to know just the melody so they could play it in their sleep, you know. That's a good way to approach it. And then after that, you start changing things around. One of the first things you might want to do is move it to a different area on the neck. Say we start on this A note here. For that first phrase, well, there's an open A note here. You could do it there, right? 12 frets up from that A note is this note. So find different A notes. You know the A note's your starting note for the leading phrase. Find different A notes on the neck and play the whole A part in that area. And then once you've played the whole A part in that area, then mix them up. You've got it in one area, you got it in another area. Mix them up. Start it in this area, move to the other area. That way you can create interesting sort of textural changes without, and you're not changing the melody at all. But you're learning your fingerboard, you're moving it around, you're seeing how the different texture changes change the mood maybe of your solo, but you're not really changing the notes you're selecting. So that's one good way to go about it. Another advantage, again, to knowing each 2-bar phrase intimately under your fingers, in your brain, and theoretically what's going to happen through an analysis process. If I wanted to change this thing from the key of D to the key of G, it's not that hard. I just move it over one string, right? If I want to change it to the key of C, I move it over another string. That's not tough because you're just playing the same pattern. But what if I wanted to do it like in the key of B flat? You know, there's famous mandolin tunes in the key of B flat, New Camptown Races and Rebecca and things like that. Doesn't have to be that you're on the mandolin. If you're joining a mandolin player on another instrument that's playing those tunes, it's going to be pretty much probably in that key. So you might have to learn a little bit about the key of B flat. Well, you know that in the key of D, that first phrase is... You could analyze that, be a little geekish about it maybe, and say this is 5, 4, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. You know, those scale degrees that way. You don't have to go that far really, but sometimes it might help. Now, find the B flat scale. Orient your brain where that B flat scale is. And relatively to those notes in the D scale that I just played, and again, you wouldn't have to go through every note like that. If you knew you knew that it started on the 5th scale degree, you could go to the B flat scale, start on the 5th scale degree, and if your relative ear pitch was good enough, you could easily figure it out or find it, right? But the B flat scale, you're going to go. Simple pattern, same pattern on 2 consecutive strings starting on the B flat note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we knew that the the lead into the song started on the 5th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the 5. You don't even need to know what note it is. It's an F note, but so we could start our solo there. Alright, so that would be the first phrase in the key of E flat. So knowing this information would help you move things around. Now if you wanted to start to work on creating your own solos, you could use this information as well. Again, let's just take the first phrase for sake of time. So let's go back to the key of D, the first phrase. So there's the first phrase in the key of D. Well, we analyzed this before to say that there were notes out of the chord here. F sharp and D. Well, there's another note in the chord, which is an A. We could insert that and go, right? And then for the next phrase, right? So that's okay. That's cool because there were 2 notes in the out of the chord. And we notice there's some space we could fill up. What's the next logical note that you could fill in there? I mean, you could fill scale runs in, but let's fill the chord in, play the arpeggio. All right? So let's do that over the first phrase, the theme, and the answer to the theme. Do the same thing, because remember that just toggled between 2 notes of the chord as well. So we can go. So you can throw those notes in, and that resolving phrase, I've been going, and we talked about last time where you go. Now instead of that, at the end, you could keep going over notes of that D scale. You could do something like this. Okay, instead of ending on that D note here, you end at that D note there. Alright, so that's just a lot of different ways that you can take that first 2-bar phrase and mess around with it, moving it to a different place on the fingerboard, different octave, moving it to a different key, adding different notes to it, and then you just play with that first 2-bar phrase until you can come up with some cool stuff and you know it really well. Then go to the next 2-bar phrase and build your own ways to play the song slowly, like you learned the song to begin with. Anyway, that's some ideas for you to mess around with. This is Dan Miller for Bluegrass Unlimited magazine. We'll see you next time. We'll take a look at the B part to Liberty in the same way. Okay.